Ariana Caldwell had taken hundreds of flights in her life, but that morning felt different the moment she stepped out of the black SUV onto the quiet runway. The sky was still waking up, a soft gray with streaks of pale orange, and the cool air carried the smell of jet fuel and damp concrete. Her assistant had already loaded her bags. Everything was set, everything was routine, everything was normal, at least. That was how it looked. Ariana adjusted the strap of her leather work bag on her shoulder and walked toward the sleek private jet waiting for her. She tried to clear her mind. The meeting she was flying to was important, maybe the most important one she had scheduled in months, and she wanted her thoughts sharp. A deal of that size required focus. And yet, something in her chest felt tight, like her instincts were whispering for her to pay attention. The pilot stood at the bottom of the stairs, straight-backed and silent. Captain Drew Halston. She had been told he was a former Air Force pilot with years of experience. His record was clean. His background checks were clear. Nothing about him suggested a problem. But as Ariana approached, she noticed how tense his jaw looked, how his eyes seemed distant instead of welcoming. "Good morning," Ariana said with a polite smile. Drew nodded. "Morning, ma'am." His voice was steady enough, but there was a stiffness beneath it, as if speaking cost him effort. Ariana paused for a second, trying to read him, but she brushed it off. People had off days. Maybe he was just tired. She stepped into the plane, greeted by the soft glow of the cabin lights and the faint hum of the engines warming up. The flight attendant offered her tea and helped her place her bag on the seat beside her. Ariana settled in, pulling out her tablet to review the notes for her upcoming meeting. She always liked to be thorough. Preparation was part of what had built her success: years of long nights, smart risks, and disciplined focus had taken her from a cramped apartment and a second-hand laptop to becoming one of the most influential investors in her field. As the plane door closed, she felt a subtle shift in the air, like everything around her had clicked into place. The engines grew louder. The cabin vibrated gently. She glanced at her watch, then out the window at the runway, lined with lights. Ariana didn't scare easily. She had been in rooms where millions of dollars were at stake. She had stood on stages where thousands watched. She had handled pressure more times than she could count. So she didn't expect the strange unease that kept creeping into her mind. Maybe she was just tired, she told herself. She had barely slept 4 hours. When the plane began to move, Drew's voice came over the intercom. "Takeoff in a few minutes. Weather looks clear. Flight time is just under 2 hours." The tone was flat professional, but missing the casual confidence she was used to hearing from pilots. Ariana frowned slightly. She wasn't scared, but her instincts were not the kind she ignored. The jet turned, gained speed, and lifted into the sky. Ariana leaned her head back and closed her eyes for a brief moment, letting the noise of the engines steady her thoughts. But then she heard something. Not a sound. Exactly more like the absence of one. The flight attendant usually checked on her once the plane leveled. That was standard. But minutes passed without the familiar soft footsteps or friendly voice. Ariana opened her eyes, glanced down the aisle, and noticed the attendant's seat was empty. Maybe they were securing equipment. Maybe they were busy. But as the minutes stretched, Ariana's uneasiness grew heavier. She unbuckled her seatbelt and stood. The cabin felt colder than usual. She approached the attendant's station, only to find it empty. A cup sat on the counter, still steaming. That meant the attendant had been there recently, very recently. Ariana called out quietly, not wanting to sound alarmed. "Hello?" No answer. She tried again, louder this time. "Is everything all right?" Still nothing. Her pulse picked up a little. Maybe the attendant was checking supplies in the back. Maybe they were on a call. Maybe there was a technical issue. Ariana tried to keep herself reasonable, not paranoid. She walked further down the cabin and tried the door, leading to the small galley in the rear. Empty. Not a single sign of anyone. Ariana stopped. The silence felt wrong. She took a slow breath and decided to check the cockpit. Maybe the attendant had gone up there. It wasn't common, but it wasn't impossible. She reached for the cockpit door. Locked. She tapped the door. Captain Halston? No response. She tapped again, louder this time. Captain? Is everything all right? Nothing. A cold ripple crawled up her spine. Ariana stepped back, trying to think logically. Planes had locked cockpit doors for security, but pilots always responded. That was protocol. Silence wasn't normal. She checked the cabin again. Still empty. Something inside her chest tightened further. A quiet but urgent warning. Maybe there was a radio issue. Maybe Drew was focusing on turbulence. Maybe the attendant had stepped into a back compartment for storage and simply didn't hear her. But her instincts said otherwise. Ariana walked back to her seat and sat down slowly. Her mind was sharp now, every sense heightened. She had learned long ago not to brush away intuition. It had saved her more than once, sometimes in business, sometimes in life. She looked around the cabin again, memorizing every detail. The cabin lights were steady. The air was still. Nothing looked wrong, and yet everything felt wrong. Ariana opened her tablet again, but she wasn't reading anymore. Her mind was studying the situation. She lifted her phone to try the Wi-Fi, but the network didn't appear. Strange. The plane always had a connection enabled once they were in the air. She waited another minute and tried again. Still nothing. Her heartbeat grew louder in her ears. A sudden soft click echoed through the cabin. Ariana froze. It came from the cockpit door, but the door didn't open. Instead, the intercom crackled. Drew's voice filled the cabin again, but this time it sounded strained. We're adjusting course slightly due to wind patterns. Please remain seated for safety. Ariana stared at the speaker. The words were right, but the tone was not. Pilots didn't sound like that unless something was seriously wrong. She rose and walked back to the cockpit door again, swallowing her worry. Captain Halston, please answer. I need confirmation everything is all right. Silence. Ariana pressed her palm against the door. Open the door, please. Still nothing. She returned to her seat slowly, her mind racing now in quiet, controlled circles. She had spent her life solving problems. She had trained herself to stay calm when things went sideways. This situation demanded the same discipline. She took out a small notebook and pen from her bag. It was something she always carried, an old habit from when she used to plan her dreams on buses and train rides. Now she used it to write down what she observed. She listed everything. The attendant missing, the cockpit locked, the silence, the pilot's strange tone, the Wi-Fi being down. Then she wrote the question she couldn't ignore. Why? Planes didn't change routine procedures without explaining. Staff didn't disappear. Pilots didn't shut themselves in without communication. Her breathing stayed steady, but her mind was working fast. Ariana glanced out the window. They were flying above a thick layer of clouds. She tried to gauge the direction, but she wasn't an expert. All she could tell was that something felt off. More time passed. The plane kept flying smoothly, almost too smoothly, as if it were gliding on autopilot. Finally, she heard another click. This time, the intercom turned on before the sound fully settled. We'll be adjusting altitude shortly, Drew said. His voice wavered, not enough for someone untrained to notice, but Ariana caught it instantly. Please stay seated. She leaned back in her seat, hands clasped in her lap. She stared at the ceiling quietly, thinking of all the times she had trusted strangers with her safety during travel. The industry relied on strict checks, careful planning, thorough monitoring. She had never questioned that system. Now, for the first time, she wondered whether she should have. More clouds passed below them. A faint humming vibration ran through the cabin as the plane began a gentle descent. Ariana straightened, gripping the armrest. Descent wasn't unheard of, but they were not near their destination, yet not even close. Minutes later, the plane leveled out again. The silence afterward felt heavier than ever. Ariana stood again. This time, not slowly. She approached the cockpit door with purpose and knocked hard. "Captain Halston, I need immediate confirmation of our flight plan." Silence. She knocked again. "Captain, open this door. I need a response." Still nothing. Ariana stared at the metal door for several seconds, then exhaled through her nose and stepped back. Something was happening, something she didn't understand yet, but she would. Ariana took a seat near the front of the cabin, closer to the cockpit. If something changed, she wanted to hear it. She wanted to feel it. Her instincts pushed her to be ready. She didn't panic, not even for a second. Instead, she focused. She steadied her breathing, pulled out her pen again, and wrote one more line in her notebook. "Something is wrong with the pilot." The words sat there on the page. Heavy but honest. Outside the window, the sky looked calm, peaceful even. The sun peeked through the clouds in soft bands of gold. But inside the cabin, Ariana felt something shifting. She didn't know what was coming. She only knew that whatever it was, it had already begun. The cabin felt too quiet, almost like the walls were holding their breath. Ariana stayed seated near the front, her eyes fixed on the locked cockpit door. She could hear the soft hum of the engines, steady and calm, a sound that normally brought comfort. But now it only made the silence inside the plane feel heavier. She checked the time again. They should have been well on their way to the city by now, closing in on the usual flight path. But everything felt off, not dramatically, but enough to make her stomach tighten. Ariana had lived long enough to know that danger did not always arrive loudly. Sometimes it whispered. Sometimes it hid in routine. Sometimes it wore a calm face. She looked at her notebook again, the words she had written staring back at her. "Something is wrong with the pilot." She tapped her pen lightly against the page. She wasn't someone who jumped to conclusions. Her life had taught her patience, caution, and strategy. Yet here she was, alone on a plane with a pilot who refused to speak to her and a missing flight attendant. Ariana closed the notebook gently and slipped it into her bag. She needed a plan, something practical. Sitting still wasn't enough. She stood again and walked back to the galley. She opened the small compartments, one after another. There was nothing unusual: snacks, bottled water, sealed containers, safety kits. Everything looked like it always did on her flights. But where was the flight attendant? Ariana checked the tiny restroom in the back, knocking once before opening the door. Empty. She stepped back into the aisle and turned slowly, scanning the cabin. The windows, the seats, the neatly folded blankets. Nothing out of place. And yet the absence of another human being pressed against her mind. She moved toward the cockpit door again. As she reached it, she noticed something she hadn't paid attention to earlier. A faint scratch near the lock, thin and curved. Had it been there before? She leaned a little closer, careful not to touch the metal. It didn't look dangerous, but it looked recent, like the door had been forced shut or something had hit it. Ariana lifted her hand and knocked again, firm and clear. "Captain Halston, I need communication. Please respond." She waited. Nothing. She tried again, louder. "Captain, if there is a situation, I need to know." Still silence. A slow breath left her chest. She stepped back, giving herself space to think. The plane continued forward, steady and smooth, as if nothing at all were wrong. But Ariana knew better. Silence from the cockpit was not standard. A missing attendant was not standard. A sudden change in altitude was not standard. She walked back to her seat and sat down, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She tried to think through the possibilities. Was the pilot hurt? Was he dealing with a mechanical issue? Was the attendant assisting him? None of those answered the locked door. None of them explained the silence. Her phone, still unable to connect, sat useless. She laid it on the small table beside her. The plane was designed for privacy. That meant limitations: no public radio, no secondary communication channels she could reach without access to the cockpit. Ariana looked out the window. The cloud layer stretched wide, smooth like a soft blanket. The sky above it was a pale blue, so calm that it almost felt mocking. She had flown enough times to understand direction roughly. And she wasn't imagining it. Something in the angle of their movement felt unfamiliar. A soft chime sounded suddenly, making her jump slightly. It came from the speakers overhead. Then Drew's voice, flat and controlled, filled the cabin. "We are going to be adjusting our route due to slight turbulence ahead. Please remain in your seat." Ariana stared at the speaker, frozen. Adjusting route? Again? And his tone had changed. It sounded as if he were choosing each word carefully, like someone trying not to reveal something. She didn't respond out loud, but a quiet determination formed inside her. If she couldn't get information from him, she had to find it herself. She unbuckled and walked to the cockpit one more time. She pressed her ear against the cool metal of the door. At first, she heard nothing. Then, just barely, she picked up the faint, uneven sound of breathing. Someone was definitely in there. She stepped away slowly. Ariana sat down again, but this time her eyes were sharper, more alert. She had built her entire career on reading people, not their words, but their patterns, their deviations. The cracks in their behavior. Everything about Drew's behavior was a crack. The plane suddenly dipped. Not dramatically, but enough for her to grip the armrests. The descent lasted only a moment before leveling out again. Ariana inhaled slowly. She wasn't afraid of flying, but she was afraid of the unknown, and right now, the unknown filled the entire cabin. She needed to think. She needed to observe. She needed to understand. She stood once more, unable to sit still. The movement helped her mind work. As she paced the aisle, her eyes caught something on the floor near the corner of the galley. A small object, barely noticeable. She bent to pick it up. A badge. The flight attendant's name badge. It was lying face down. The metal clip slightly bent. Ariana's breath hitched. This was wrong. Very wrong. She looked around again, scanning the cabin more urgently. She walked back to the galley and checked behind the small curtain, behind the storage crates, under the seats. Nothing. The badge in her hand felt heavier than it should. She turned it over, running her thumb over the smooth surface. The name was printed clearly. The badge was intact. It didn't look broken or damaged. It just didn't belong on the floor. Ariana swallowed hard. Her heart beat faster, not wild, just stronger, like it was bracing itself. She straightened and moved toward the cockpit door again. She didn't knock this time. She simply stood there for a moment, letting the weight of the situation settle in her mind like a stone. Whatever was happening, she wasn't imagining it. She returned to her seat, setting the badge gently on the table. She stared at it for a long moment, her fingers tapping the edge. Her mind replayed everything: the missing attendant, the silence, the locked door, the changed route, the strange tone of the pilot. Nothing fit into a harmless explanation. She picked up her notebook again and wrote a new line. The flight attendant's badge was on the floor. She underlined it once. Ariana closed her eyes briefly and took a deep breath, steadying herself. She tried to remember everything she knew about emergency protocols. She wasn't trained in aviation, but she had learned the basics over time from private flight briefings. The cabin was secure. The cockpit was locked. Her only option was observation and preparation. She needed to stay calm. Panic wouldn't help. Fear wouldn't help. Her strength had always been her ability to think under pressure. Not another 20 minutes passed. The engines hummed, the plane steady as ever. But the longer the silence lasted, the stranger it felt. Then, without warning, the cabin lights flickered. Just once, briefly, but enough for Ariana to look up sharply. The lights steadied again. A small turbulence bump followed. Nothing serious, just a shake of the cabin. Ariana grabbed the armrest lightly, her mind racing. Why had the lights flickered? Electrical issue? Turbulence? Or something happening in the cockpit? Ariana watched the cockpit door again, as if expecting it to suddenly open. But it stayed shut, unmoving. She stood one more time, driven by instinct. She approached the door slowly, listening again. No voices, no footsteps. Just the soft hum of machinery. She pressed her palm lightly against the door, as if the metal itself could tell her something. Then, for the first time, she heard something faint from inside, the sound of something being placed down. Maybe a small object, maybe something heavier. Her heart thudded once. Hard, Ariana backed away. She didn't want to alert the pilot that she was listening. She returned to her seat, breathing slowly through her nose, forcing herself to stay collected. The plane continued forward, gliding through the sky like everything was normal. But Ariana knew the truth. Now, something was very wrong. She picked up her pen again, but this time her hand hesitated. She wasn't sure what to write next because she didn't know what was coming. Instead, she wrote one word. Why? She stared at the word for several seconds. Then she wrote another line beneath it. What changed the pilot's behavior? She lifted her head slowly, her eyes drifting back to the cockpit door. She didn't have an answer yet, but she felt the question settling deep inside her like the start of a storm. And she knew that soon. Whether she was ready or not, she would find out. Ariana sat in the quiet cabin, the engines humming softly under her feet. But the calm sound did nothing to ease her thoughts. She felt it now. Something had shifted in the air, something she could no longer brush aside with wishful thinking or logic. Whatever was happening in the cockpit was not routine. It was not mechanical. It was not a misunderstanding, and it was not normal. The flight attendant's badge still lay on the small table beside her seat, a silent reminder that someone else should have been in the cabin with her. Someone who would have checked on her, offered her water, talked to her, anything. But the badge was the only trace left of them. Ariana picked it up again, turning it slowly in her fingers. It wasn't damaged. It wasn't dirty. It simply shouldn't have been on the floor. For a moment, she wondered if the attendant had dropped it by mistake while moving something. But even that thought didn't settle her nerves. Something was wrong, and she knew it. She had always trusted the system, trusted trained professionals, trusted the long chain of checks that made private air travel one of the safest forms of transportation. Yet trust had its limits, and this situation had crossed them. Ariana stood once more and walked down the aisle. The carpet felt soft under her shoes, the cabin air cool against her skin. She stood a few feet from the cockpit door and listened. No voices. No footsteps. No movement. She knocked again. 3 steady taps. Captain Halston, she said carefully, keeping her voice calm. If you can hear me, I need you to respond. Even a small confirmation. Silence. Ariana closed her eyes for a moment. She wasn't afraid to speak firmly, but raising her voice felt pointless now. Drew wasn't refusing to answer because he didn't hear her. He was choosing not to answer. She stepped away from the door and sat in the seat directly across from the cockpit, the one normally reserved for crew. Her hands rested on her lap as she studied the door. It was just a piece of metal, but in that moment it felt like a barrier between her and the truth. Minutes passed 5, then 10. She checked her watch anxiously. She didn't want to panic, but her thoughts kept circling the same question. Why would a trained pilot ignore her? Suddenly, the intercom crackled faintly, like a radio struggling to find a signal. Ariana sat up straighter. Waiting got, then Drew's voice came through, but only for a few seconds. We're making adjustment. Stay seated. Then nothing. His voice had been uneven, like someone speaking quickly or under stress. The silence that followed felt even heavier than before. Ariana stood again, unable to stay still any longer. She walked to the window and looked outside. The clouds were thick now, forming a soft, endless sheet beneath them. They were flying lower than before. She could tell by the color of the sky, the slight difference in pressure. Another descent. Why? Ariana felt her heartbeat pick up. She tried the cabin phone, but the line was dead. She checked her phone again. Still nothing. The plane's Wi-Fi refused to connect, not even to the main signal channel used for in-flight messaging. Ariana paced the aisle with slow, deliberate steps. She wasn't sure what she was looking for. Maybe a clue, maybe a sign, maybe something that would make sense of all of this. She reached the galley again, searching the small space even more carefully this time. She checked every compartment, every drawer, every corner. Everything looked normal, except for the silence. She opened one of the cabinets near the floor, where emergency equipment was usually stored. Inside she found small oxygen canisters, sealed medical kits, and a few blankets. Nothing out of the ordinary. She closed it, then knelt beside the next one. This time, she noticed something odd. A small piece of fabric caught between the door and the frame. Light blue. She pulled gently, and it slid loose. It was soft part of a uniform. Ariana stared at it, her breath catching. The flight attendant's uniform was blue. Her throat tightened. The cloth wasn't torn or damaged, but it didn't belong stuffed in a cabinet door. It looked like it had been caught accidentally while someone was moving quickly. Or being moved. Ariana stood, her palms cold, her mind now racing in sharp, focused lines. She wasn't imagining the situation. She wasn't overthinking. She wasn't paranoid. There was a real problem. She walked toward the cockpit again. This time, she didn't knock. She just stood there, listening. If Drew was hiding information, she needed to stay alert. She pressed her ear to the metal door. At first, nothing, then a faint sound. Not breathing this time, but something metallic clicking softly, like someone flipping a switch or adjusting a lever. Ariana stepped back. She knew enough to realize that pilots made those sounds when adjusting controls or changing settings. But she didn't know why he would be doing it without communicating with her. She took a slow breath. She needed a plan. If she couldn't get Drew to respond through the door or intercom, she had to prepare for whatever he was doing. She returned to her seat, her mind replaying every detail she had noticed, every small shift in the plane's movement. A sudden vibration shook the cabin slightly, not violent, just enough to make her grip the armrest. Then the plane tilted to the right, gently but noticeably. Ariana sat up straighter. This wasn't turbulence. This was a turn, a sharp change in direction. Her eyes widened as she leaned toward the window. She couldn't see land, yet only thick clouds, but she felt the turn in her body, the shift in pressure. This wasn't their route. This wasn't even close. Ariana reached for the seatbelt and buckled it quickly. Her hands were steady, but her breath had grown shallow. The plane continued the turn for several more seconds. Then it leveled out. The sky remained calm, the engines steady. Ariana stared at the cockpit again. She had run companies, handled crises, managed emergencies. But nothing in her experience had prepared her for being locked in a moving aircraft without a pilot responding to her. She wasn't helpless, but she was limited. And that was a feeling she had never handled well. After another long stretch of quiet, the intercom crackled again. Drew's voice returned, but this time it was softer, almost strained. "We'll be landing sooner than planned. Please sit down and remain calm." Landing? Sooner? Ariana felt her heartbeat stop for one split second. Landing where? She stood slowly and walked toward the cockpit door again. She kept her voice steady, but there was an edge of steel behind it. "Captain Halston," she called. "I need more information. Where are we landing? Why was our route changed?" Silence. "Captain," she said now louder, "if there's an emergency, I must know." Silence again. The calm, steady humming of the engines seemed to mock her. She pressed her palm gently against the cold door. "Please," she said softly, "just tell me what's happening." Nothing. Ariana stepped back slowly. She had to prepare for the worst possibility, that Drew was intentionally withholding information. But why? What reason could a trained pilot have to hide the landing location or reroute the plane without explanation? She walked toward the window again, her eyes scanning the sky. The clouds began to thin, revealing glimpses of darker land below mountains. Uneven terrain, nothing like the approach to the city she had expected. Her chest tightened. This wasn't a city. This was nowhere near one. Ariana moved quickly down the aisle, checking each window. The land below grew clearer mountain ridges, dense trees, patches of snow. They were nowhere near civilization. Her breath trembled just slightly as she processed what she was seeing. He was landing the plane in a remote area. Why? Ariana returned to her seat, her mind whirring. This was no accident. This was not turbulence or weather, or a slight rerouting. This was intentional. The plane dipped again, descending lower this time. Ariana gripped the armrests as the cabin shook lightly. The engines changed pitch a lower, heavier sound that signaled their approach. Her pulse thudded in her ears. The intercom clicked once more, but Drew didn't speak this time. Just a small static pop before silence returned. Ariana closed her eyes for a moment and inhaled deeply. She needed to stay focused. Panic wouldn't help her. Fear wouldn't help her. She needed her mind sharp, steady, and ready. She opened her eyes slowly, her gaze fixed on the cockpit door. Whatever awaited her on the ground, whatever reason Drew had for changing their entire route, she was about to find out, and nothing in her life had prepared her for what was coming next. Part 4 story of approximately 1,700 words in simple. Natural English goes here. I will now write the full Part 4 story in this document. Ariana stood in the cold air outside the small weather station building, feeling the thin wind move across her face. The place was so quiet that even the sound of the wind felt loud. She had expected fear to be the strongest thing inside her, but now it was confusion. The pilot, Drew, stood a short distance away with his hands on his head, pacing like someone trying to outrun his own thoughts. She watched him carefully. His steps were uneven. His breathing was heavy. He looked like a person who had been holding the same worry for too long, and now it was breaking him from the inside. "Drew," she said finally, keeping her voice steady, "you said someone told you things about me. I need you to explain it from the start. Not pieces, everything." Her calm tone made him freeze. He turned toward her, his face tight and warm. "You wouldn't believe it," he whispered. "Maybe I will," she said. "Try me." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't push. She simply stood with the quiet confidence that came from years of learning how to face chaos. Drew let out a long breath. "Fine, but it's not simple." He walked toward the old building. Ariana followed him, stepping over patches of dry grass and loose gravel. The air smelled faintly of dust. He pushed open the wooden door, and they stepped inside. The room was small and empty, except for a few broken chairs and an old metal table. Light came in from one cracked window. Drew set his backpack on the table. His hands shook slightly as he opened it. Ariana? I didn't divert the plane because I wanted to hurt you. I diverted it because I thought you were someone else. Someone dangerous to me. Ariana kept her eyes on him. Every detail mattered now. He pulled out a folder worn, bent, and full of papers that looked like they'd been handled too many times. These were sent to me over the past 3 months, he said, placing them on the table. Ariana stepped closer and gently touched the top page. She didn't open it yet. Sent by who? I don't know. They never used names. Just messages. Emails that vanished. Notes left at my apartment. Sometimes pictures in envelopes with no return address. A chill slid down her spine. What kind of pictures? He swallowed. Pictures of you. And documents that said you were tied to the people who destroyed my family. Ariana's eyebrows pulled together. Destroyed your family? Drew nodded slowly, as if saying the words out loud made them heavier. My brother. He disappeared after taking a job with a military contractor. They said it was voluntary. They said he left because he couldn't handle the pressure. But that wasn't true. He sent me messages before he vanished. He said he found something illegal. Something that put him in danger. He pushed the folder toward her. Ariana opened it. The papers inside were a mix of financial records, emails, screenshots, and reports. At first glance, they looked professional, believable, but only at first glance. She knew how to read forged documents. She had spent the last year investigating a contractor involved in data, manipulation, and psychological pressure campaigns. She recognized the pattern immediately. Fake symbols. Wrong formatting. Inconsistent signatures. Numbers that didn't match government structures. She lifted one paper, holding it to the dim light. These aren't real, she said softly. Drew stared at her. Don't lie to me. I'm not. She placed the paper down carefully. I've seen forgeries like these before. I'm researching a group, the same contractor you mentioned. They're known for planting false evidence. They use fear to push people into making choices they would never make. Drew's eyes widened slowly. So you're saying everything I was sent ... was designed to control you, she said. To make you believe I was part of the people who took your brother. To push you into acting. Maybe even to get rid of me. They knew my travel plans. They knew you'd be the pilot. They wanted this. He backed away until his shoulders touched the wall. No, that can't be true. Why me? Why send all this to me? Ariana stayed calm. Because you're vulnerable. You're skilled enough to take control of a flight. Desperate enough to believe the worst. You were the perfect target. Drew slid down the wall and sat on the floor, placing his hands over his face. He didn't cry, but he looked like someone who wanted to. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I was protecting myself. I thought I was getting justice for him. His voice broke slightly. Ariana slowly knelt in front of him. She kept a safe distance, but made sure he knew she wasn't angry, only focused. Drew, listen to me. Those people manipulated you. And they manipulated me too. They tried to bury the investigation I was doing by making me look guilty of things I've never touched. You're not alone. We've both been attacked in different ways. He looked up at her, his eyes red and defeated. So what happens now? Ariana stood and offered him a hand to help him up. Now we figure out the truth. Together. He hesitated, then took her hand. She lifted him to his feet. The room felt slightly warmer now, though nothing outside had changed. Ariana pointed to the papers again. Show me everything. Not just the clean pages. I want the messages you saved. The pictures. Every detail. Drew opened another part of the folder. This section was Messier crumpled printouts, screenshots, messages scribbled on sticky notes. Ariana read through them carefully. Some emails claimed she had been involved in secret payments. Others accused her of supporting illegal testing programs. One document even claimed she had attended secret meetings at locations she had never heard of. But every piece had flaws, wrong timestamps, wrong formatting, logos in the wrong size, signatures that were clearly copied and pasted. She looked up at him. These were made by someone who knows just enough to be dangerous, but not enough to make it perfect. A professional manipulator, not a professional investigator. Drew rubbed his forehead. If what you're saying is true, someone wanted us to meet like this. Not in a normal way. In a way that looked like a crime. Exactly, she said. If I went missing after a flight you piloted, guess who they would blame? He froze. Ariana continued. And if they silenced me, they'd eliminate the only person gathering evidence against them. 2 problems solved at once. The truth hung heavy in the room. Drew sat down again, this time more controlled. So you're telling me I wasn't supposed to survive this either? Ariana didn't answer at first. She looked him in the eyes. I think neither of us were meant to leave that flight unharmed. He let out a shaky breath. My God. She pulled a chair closer and sat across from him. Listen, you didn't hurt me. And you didn't crash the plane. You made a bad choice based on lies. But now we have the chance to turn this into something bigger, something that exposes what they're doing. He looked unsure. Expose them how? Ariana leaned forward slightly. By comparing your documents with the ones I already have. By showing the patterns. By proving someone tried to control both of us. Once we connect everything, we go public. Drew shook his head. You think anyone will believe us? They will if we have real evidence, she said. He stared at her for a quiet, long moment. I don't understand why you're being this patient with me. After what I did? I don't deserve it. Ariana gave a small sigh. You didn't hurt me. You hurt yourself. And I've seen what manipulation can do to good people. I'm not here to punish you. I'm here to stop the people who did this. Drew blinked hard. He wasn't used to compassion. Not like this. It took him a moment to steady himself. Ariana stood and walked to the window. The landscape outside was empty and quiet. They chose this place for a reason. It's far from anyone. If we leave now, we might still have time to do something before they realize the plan didn't work. Drew got to his feet. What do you need from me? She turned back to him. Honesty and courage. If you're willing to work with me, this isn't over for them. He straightened his posture, looking more like the trained pilot she first met. I'm in. Whatever it takes. Ariana nodded once. Good. Then let's get out of here and start putting the pieces together. They stepped outside into the cool air again. The sky was clearer now, with streaks of soft light breaking through the clouds. Ariana felt the weight of the last hour settle on her shoulders, but she also felt a new sense of direction. She walked toward the small jet, then paused when she noticed Drew wasn't moving. He stood still, staring at the open land with a strange expression. What is it? She asked. Drew turned to her. If they watched me this whole time, what makes you think they aren't watching right now? Ariana looked around slowly. The field was empty. The weather station was silent. But the feeling he described wasn't wrong. We stay sharp, she said. We move fast. And we don't trust anything that comes too easy. He nodded. Together, they began walking toward the plane. Behind them, the wind blew softly against the old building, carrying with it the sense that something larger had just been uncovered, a truth both of them had been pushed toward without even knowing it. The real fight, Ariana thought, was only beginning. Part 5 story, approximately 1,700 words will be written here. Ariana and Drew walked back toward the small jet with a sense of purpose that neither had expected to feel after the strange, frightening turn their day had taken. The wind had picked up a little, carrying the sharp scent of dry earth and cold air. It was quiet, too quiet, but neither of them spoke about it. They simply walked with a silent agreement that they were now in this together. When they reached the plane, Ariana stopped at the stairs and looked over the empty land again. "Before we go anywhere, we need a plan," she said. Drew nodded. "I know, but once we take off, we need to be careful. If they tracked the plane once, they can do it again." "Exactly," Ariana said, thinking. "We need to figure out where we can land safely and start piecing everything together without being noticed. Somewhere neutral. Somewhere quiet." Drew climbed the steps and looked back at her. "I know a place. A small airfield run by a friend of mine. It's private. No cameras. No logs that get shared with federal systems. We used it back when I was training new pilots. He keeps things simple." Ariana followed him into the cabin. "Is he trustworthy?" "More than anyone else I know," Drew said, powering up the systems. "But we can't tell him everything. Just enough so he doesn't ask questions." Ariana buckled into her seat. "That's fine. I just need a safe space to work. Once we get there, I'm going to cross-check every document you brought with what I already have. If the patterns match, we'll know for sure who made these forgeries." Drew took a deep breath and started the engine sequence. "I still can't believe someone played me like that," he said quietly. "Manipulation works best on good people," Ariana said. "People who care. People who want answers. That's why it worked on you, and why it almost worked on me." He glanced at her. "Almost?" She gave a small, tired smile. "I was close to giving up last month. Every time I got a lead, it vanished. Every time I got a witness, they backed out. I thought maybe I was imagining the patterns. Maybe I was wrong." She looked out the window as the jet began to move. "Then I got a message that felt too perfectly timed. Like someone wanted me to quit." "What did the message say?" Drew asked. "That if I stopped investigating, certain problems in my life would disappear," she said. "Problems I never told anyone about." Drew stiffened. "So they've been watching you too?" "Yes," Ariana said quietly. "For a long time." The plane lifted off the ground smoothly, cutting through the cold air with steady force. Ariana watched the land shrink beneath them, the abandoned strip turning into nothing more than a thin line among the hills. For a while, neither of them spoke. The hum of the engine filled the space. Drew focused on his instruments. Ariana stared at the clouds outside, thinking about all the strange little events over the past year that she had brushed aside, thinking they were coincidences. Now she knew they were not. After 20 minutes, Drew broke the silence. "Ariana, when we land and we go through everything ... what do you expect to find?" She didn't answer right away. She shifted in her seat and folded her hands in her lap. "I expect to find proof that someone built a map of both our lives. That someone studied our habits, fears, connections. That they used that information to push us toward today." He looked troubled. "But why? Why bring us together like this? Why make me think you hurt my brother?" "Because they wanted us to destroy each other," she said simply. "If I disappeared after a flight you controlled, they'd blame you. If you disappeared, they'd blame me. Either way, their problem was gone." Drew let out a slow breath. "We were both targets, yes." He gripped the controls tighter. "And if we hadn't talked ... We wouldn't be here right now, Ariana said. We would be a headline instead. They both fell silent again. When the private airfield finally came into view, a small strip surrounded by tall trees and a cluster of metal hangars, Ariana felt a wave of relief. Not safety, exactly, but relief that they had made it to the next step. Drew landed the plane smoothly. The instant the wheels touched the ground, Ariana unbuckled her seatbelt and prepared herself. She knew that whatever came next would not be easy. A man stepped out of one of the hangars and waved. Drew signaled back. "That's Tom," he said. "He won't ask too many questions." Ariana nodded. She grabbed the folder Drew had given her earlier, along with her own encrypted files stored on a small drive in her bag. Once the engines shut down, Tom approached with a friendly smile and a questioning look. "Drew? Haven't seen you in months. Everything all right?" "Yeah," Drew said quickly. "Just needed a quiet place to stop for a bit." "No traffic logs today?" Tom laughed. "You know me. Nothing gets shared unless someone pays me to do it. You two need anything? Water? Fuel?" "Fuel would be great," Drew said. Tom nodded. "Take your time. Hangars unlocked if you need shade." Then he walked back toward a fuel cart. As soon as Tom was out of earshot, Ariana touched Drew's arm. "Inside the hangar. I need space to spread everything out." He nodded. They walked to the hangar, closed the big sliding door halfway, and used a long work table near the wall. Ariana set down her files. Drew placed his documents next to hers. For a moment, the sight of the two piles of evidence made them both stare. One belonged to a billionaire who had spent a year chasing the truth. The other belonged to a pilot who had nearly thrown his life away because he believed lies. Ariana opened her laptop and powered it on. She connected the drive and began pulling up digital records. "Drew, hand me the messages you said came through email, the ones that deleted themselves." He passed her several printed screenshots. She studied them closely. "Look here," she said, pointing. "See this corner symbol? It looks normal, but it's slightly wrong. The real program has its icon 2 pixels lower. They copied it, but not correctly." Drew leaned in. "So these emails weren't actually from the sender they claimed to be?" "No," Ariana said. "They were generated through a masking system. Someone pretending to be government staff, pretending to be investigators, pretending to be anyone you would trust." Drew swallowed. "What about the financial records? The ones linking you to the contractor?" Ariana pulled up her own copy of similar records. "Watch this." She placed the two side by side. Different fake names. Different dates. Same formatting mistakes. Same wrong initials. Same digital artifact on the signature line. Drew stared at the two screens. "So whoever forged mine also forged yours." "Yes," Ariana said. "Which means they're not just after you. They're after anyone who gets close to the truth." She paused, then added quietly, "including my staff." Drew looked at her sharply. "Did they hurt anyone?" "No," Ariana said. "But they scared them. One employee quit after receiving strange phone calls. Another said she felt like someone was watching her apartment. I thought it was a coincidence. I thought maybe the job pressure was getting to them. I didn't see the pattern until now." She placed her hands flat on the table. "But it's all connected." Drew sank down into one of the metal chairs. "My brother. He must have found something big." Ariana nodded slowly. "I think he did. And I think he tried to warn you because he trusted you. They silenced him before he could explain everything, but they didn't want to take chances. They wanted to make sure anyone who went looking for answers walked into a trap." Drew closed his eyes for a moment. His jaw tensed. "He didn't deserve that." "No one does," Ariana said gently. "But now that we know what we're dealing with, we have a chance to expose it. Drew shook his head. Expose it how? They've covered every trail. They've tampered with evidence. They've manipulated us. How do we succeed where so many others failed? Ariana turned the laptop toward him. Because they made a mistake. What mistake? They connected our stories, she said. Yours and mine. That connection gives us something no one else had before, 2 sets of forged documents, made by the same people, used in 2 different ways. That overlap is their weak point. And now we can prove it. Drew stared at the screen. So what's the plan? Ariana leaned back in her chair. First, we keep copies of everything, digital and physical. Second, we back up all evidence to encrypted storage in 3 locations so it can't be deleted. Third, we find someone we can trust in the media, someone experienced with uncovering corruption. Drew frowned. Media? Yes, Ariana said. Because once this goes public, they can't hide it. If they try to smear us, we'll have the documents ready. If they deny involvement, we'll show the matching forgery patterns. Once people see the truth, they'll come forward. Others like you. Others who were warned, threatened, or manipulated. We won't be alone. He looked uncertain. And if they come after us again? Ariana met his eyes. Then we stay 2 steps ahead. And we don't let fear guide us this time. After a long moment, Drew nodded. All right. I'm with you. Ariana gave a small smile. Good, because I need your help with the next part. What part is that? He asked Dot. She pointed at the map on her screen, several red pins marking different locations. These are places connected to the contractor. Facilities, offices, hidden research sites. We need to figure out which one your brother last visited. If we find that, we find the missing piece. Drew's expression hardened with quiet determination. Let's do it. For the next hour, they worked side by side. Ariana compared dates, digging through her old notes. Drew examined pictures, checking for anything familiar. Then, suddenly, he froze. Ariana. This one. She leaned over. The warehouse? Not a warehouse, Drew said. A testing sea. Ariana stood quietly at the edge of the hangar as the sky shifted into late afternoon light, painting the trees with a soft golden glow. The airfield was peaceful, almost too peaceful for everything weighing on her mind. She watched Drew double-check the lock on the hangar door, his movements steadier than earlier. He looked different, now still shaken, still tired, but carrying a new purpose. Something had changed in both of them, something neither expected when the day began. She waited until he walked back toward her. Ready? She asked. Drew nodded. As ready as I can be. Ariana opened the folder again, flipping to the picture of the testing center, the place Drew believed was the last location his brother visited before disappearing. The high fences, the gates, the empty surroundings. It was the kind of place built to be invisible, yet heavily guarded. This place won't be easy to get near, Ariana said. Facilities like this have layers of protection. Cameras, sensors, motion alerts. And most of the time, places like this don't show up on any official maps. Drew glanced at the picture, his jaw tightening. We'll figure it out. Ariana admired his determination. When she first met him on the plane, she only saw a pilot who looked stressed and distracted. She had no idea he carried so much weight inside him. Now she could see the strength beneath it. She took a slow breath. Before we go anywhere, we need to protect what we have. Drew watched as she took out her laptop again and connected her drive. What are you backing up? Everything, Ariana said. Your documents. My documents. Every email. Every screenshot. We make multiple copies. Some go to encrypted cloud storage. Some get saved to drives we can hide in different locations. If anything happens to us, the evidence survives. Drew nodded. Smart. It's the only way this works, she said. People like the ones we're dealing with rely on silence. They rely on loose ends disappearing. They don't expect their targets to work together. Drew let out a small breath, almost a laugh. Guess we're not doing what they expected. Ariana gave him a small smile before returning to her work. For the next half hour, she moved through files carefully, labeling each copy, encrypting each folder. Drew helped by sorting the physical documents into stacks, clipping them into place, writing notes when she needed dates confirmed, that it felt almost like preparing for an expedition. Only this one carried no guarantee they'd come back untouched. When the backups were finished, Ariana closed her laptop gently and leaned back in her chair. There, she said softly, even if everything goes wrong, the truth won't disappear. Drew looked at her for a long moment. Ariana, I want to say something. Earlier today, I did something unforgivable. I put you in danger. I made decisions based on fear, not reason. And you had every right to walk away from me. Ariana listened quietly, her eyes steady on him. But you didn't, he said. You listened. You gave me a chance when I didn't even deserve one. I don't know how I'm supposed to repay that. Ariana shook her head slightly. You don't have to repay anything. The situation pushed you. And it pushed me too. We both got caught in something bigger than us. What matters now is what we do from here. Drew lowered his gaze. I won't forget what you did today. You shouldn't, Ariana said gently. But don't let it weigh you down. Let it lift you. Use it to move forward. He nodded slowly. I will. For a moment, there was a quiet calm between them. The sound of distant rustling trees filled the hangar. Then Ariana stood. All right. Step 2. What's step 2? Drew asked. Finding someone we can trust, she said. Someone who knows how to uncover stories like this. Once we have proof, we need a voice powerful enough to make people listen. Drew raised a brow. You already know someone? I know a journalist, Ariana said. He's been following corruption cases for years. He's one of the few people I trust with information this sensitive. He lives in the city, about a 2-hour flight from here. Drew crossed his arms thoughtfully. You think he'll believe us? Ariana nodded. He won't believe us because of who we are. He'll believe us because of the evidence. Because of the patterns. Because this isn't the first time he's seen signs of something like this. Drew took a breath. All right. Let's talk to him. Ariana hesitated and added, but we have to be smart about it. If the contractor finds out we're going to a journalist, they'll try to stop us. They'll try to cut us off before the story gets out. Drew nodded. Then we don't give them that chance. Ariana zipped up her bag and held it tightly. No matter what happens after this, Drew, today changed everything. Not just for you, not just for me, but for everyone who's been affected by these people. It's time they're exposed. Drew straightened his posture, the determination on his face clear. Then let's finish this. They walked back toward the jet. Tom had finished fueling and waved at them from a distance. You two heading out already? Yeah, Drew called back. Thanks again. Tom nodded. Stay safe out there. Weather should be calm tonight. Ariana and Drew climbed the stairs. Once they were inside, Drew went through his checklist again, this time slower, more focused. Ariana settled into her seat, opening her folder again to reread the matching forgeries dot as the plane took off. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the land. Ariana watched the trees pass beneath them. Each mile felt like a step closer to the truth, and a step deeper into danger. An hour into the flight, Drew broke the silence. Ariana? She looked up from her papers. Yes? If we find out what happened to my brother, if we actually get answers, I don't know what I'm supposed to feel, or what I'm supposed to do next. Ariana softened. You don't need to decide that now. The only thing you need to focus on is the next step. After that, you take the next one. And the next? Healing doesn't come all at once. He nodded slightly. And you? Why are you doing all this? Why keep pushing when they keep trying to stop you? Ariana looked out the window, watching the clouds slip past. Because people like them rely on destroying the truth. And I was never the kind of person who could ignore something like that. If I walked away, I'd spend the rest of my life wondering how many people got hurt because I stayed quiet. Drew considered her words, then smiled faintly. You're stronger than you realize. Ariana didn't respond, but his words stayed with her. When they reached the city, Drew flew low over the outskirts, avoiding major flight paths. They landed at a small private strip outside town. Ariana kept her head down as they exited the plane. Drew pulled the folder close to his chest. This way, Ariana said quietly. He lives nearby. They walked past an empty parking area until they reached a small road leading into a residential neighborhood. Streetlights flickered on as the sky shifted into dusk. Drew walked beside her, his steps solid but cautious. You're sure he's the right person? He's the only person who's been trying to warn the public about things like this, Ariana said. But he needed evidence. And now we have it. They reached a low building at the end of the block. Warm light spilled from the windows. Ariana knocked on the door. A moment later, it opened. A man in his 50s stood there, wearing glasses and holding a pen behind his ear. His eyes widened when he saw Ariana. You look like you've been through something, he said. You have no idea, Ariana replied. He stepped aside. Come in, both of you. Ariana and Drew entered the cozy living room. The journalist closed the door quietly. So, he said, adjusting his glasses. I'm guessing this isn't a social visit. Ariana placed the folder on his coffee table. We have evidence. Real evidence. 2 different people targeted by the same contractor, using the same methods. He leaned forward, eyes sharp. How soon can I see it? Ariana opened the folder. He studied the documents, flipping through them one by one. Drew watched his face carefully, looking for any sign of disbelief. After several minutes, the journalist sat back slowly. This, he whispered, this is bigger than I thought. I knew something was happening behind the scenes, but this is organized, strategic, and dangerous. Ariana nodded. We know. The journalist turned to Drew. You're the pilot involved in the flight diversion incident today, aren't you? Drew stiffened. Word travels fast. I have sources, the journalist said, and they mentioned something unusual, but they didn't know the details. He pointed at the documents. Now I do. Ariana leaned forward. Can you help us? The journalist nodded slowly. Yes, I can't promise it will be quick or safe, but I can promise the truth will come out. And once this is published, the contractor won't be able to hide behind forged documents and fake emails anymore. Drew let out a breath he'd been holding. Ariana felt a wave of quiet relief wash over her. The journalist closed the folder gently. I'll need time to verify everything and protect both of you. But trust me, this story won't disappear. Ariana stood. Thank you. Drew stood beside her, looking steadier than he had all day. The journalist walked them to the door. Stay alert, he said softly. After tonight, things may get harder before they get better. Ariana nodded. We know. Outside, the street was quiet. Drew looked at Ariana. So, what now? Ariana took a deep breath. Now we wait, and we stay prepared. The truth is in motion, and once it reaches the world, she looked up at the night sky, deep and endless. Everything changes.